Well, hey, we'll go through this. I don't want to keep it too long. I appreciate you getting on.
Yeah, you bet.
I got some deep questions for you today that's gonna make you have to be real vulnerable and teach us a bunch.
Hey,
Is that cool?
great. Love it.
So, for the listeners, I've known Chris for probably I don't know, like a decade in the solar space now. I think.
That's
So
probably
I
right.
first met Chris. We met at RE Plus. What did RE Plus used to be called?
Oh, what was it? I can't even
Whatever
remember.
it was. Anyway, it's a big solar convention, and we were there just visiting. And you were there, like I don't know what you were doing. You were trying to get maybe a new inverter partner. Maybe you were looking for good deals on mods or something like that. But I'm like, hey, I heard that you're getting into the install space, and you were talking about like buying panels from China and like how much more money was in solar and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, dude, we've been doing solar sales for a while. We ought to start looking into doing this install game. So you were the one that incepted that idea into our heads.
Good, good. I like to hear that every once in a while. I like to inspire people.
It's awesome. So Chris, you built your solar company out of a garage, and within what, like 5 years, grew it to $200 million, and then had a sale in 2023. You kind of had the fairy tale story that everybody dreams of and everybody thinks that they're gonna hit. And I'm sure that was just super easy for you, right? To be able to build a company like that and just sell within 5 years.
Yeah,
Super easy.
sounds good on paper.
Tell us, what are some of the hard lessons that you learned along the way, maybe even before solar? What are some of the tough things that you went through that taught you the lessons that you needed to help you have the kind of success in business that you've had?
Yeah, I mean, I think it all goes back to foundation as a child, as early entrepreneur. There's a lot of different lessons and things. I grew up with not a lot of money, and my dad was a school teacher, raising 7 kids on his salary. Mom stayed at home, and so we learned and worked hard from a young age. And so I had my first job at age 9 and just had to figure out through trial and error. I wasn't educated on entrepreneurship or business ownership, but but I always knew I wanted to be rich, and I always knew that there were big things that I wanted to accomplish. And so launched my first business when I was 24 years old. And that's obviously, although I've lived what most entrepreneurs would dream of, I've also lived the nightmares of entrepreneurship. And so, the first business was what keeps most people away from opening up their first business. Everybody is scared of they're scared of that. Like, what will happen if I can't pay my bills? What will happen if I make mistakes? What will happen if X, Y, and Z? And I lived all those what ifs, right? Like, I scaled the wrong way, built with the wrong partnerships, made a lot of poor choices, did things for ego, launched at the worst macroeconomic time in at least my lifetime. We launched that business in 2008, right as we were heading into the crash. So like, all the things that could have gone wrong went wrong. And 2.5 years later, ended up filing bankruptcy for 2.2 million. Car repoed out of my driveway, less than $1,000 in my bank account, owed people, family members, money that had invested. My dad, again, didn't have a lot of money, but he took and put half of his life savings into my business, and it was gone. And
Dude, that's brutal.
yeah, my father-in-law had put $1 million into that business because I sold him on that he was going to be rich, and that was gone. So like, dude, yeah, like I've lived, like I said, I've lived most people's nightmares.
Yeah.
And so and like I said, those monsters that we create in our mind is usually what keeps us from taking risk.
So can I ask you this then, like looking back at all of that you had to go through, number one, do you think that you could have had the success that you've had you not gone through that? And would you go back and actually change anything knowing what the outcome has been because of the things that you've learned?
Uh, I absolutely would not change a thing, right? Like, yeah, everything that I've experienced has been for a reason. I believe that like all things happen for a reason, and for our good, and including my failures. And so obviously during the time, or there's been times in my life that I'm like, man, I don't want to do that again. But like many of the successful designs that I know about business and like how to run a business come from the failures, like knowing what not to do.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I absolutely would not trade that for anything else.
So one of the things I love about you is like I sense that there's like zero fear in you. And that may be surface and maybe you really don't feel it, but there's certain people that I know that it's just like there's not a lot of fear. And I'm wondering if that comes just because you've been at the bottom and known like, look, the worst of the worst can happen. I can lose my father-in-law and my dad's money and have my own personal bankruptcy. I can get to the very bottom and I'm still alive. So I don't really need to be afraid of, whatever the current problem is. Do you subscribe to that?
You're exactly right. You know, most people aren't willing to go to zero, or yeah, they don't take action because they're not willing to go to zero. Since I've been to zero, I know what zero feels like. One, it's not as bad as you think it is. Like, it was terrible, all the bad things, but like, I still had everything that was important to me: God, my family, my knowledge, everything that I could go and build off. Sure, my possessions were taken away, but possessions come and go. Those are easy to recoup. And so yes, because of it, I have fear, but I deal with fear differently. Like, uh, because when fear comes, all I do is associate it with like, dude, I've already been through that. That's okay.
Yeah.
And so like you'll never get to a point where you don't experience fear. Fear is a natural human emotion. It's how you deal with fear and how you respond to fear that changes.
So you got the company going. You guys, got to the point where you're out of the garage and you need a little bit more space and all that kind of stuff. Can you tell me what were some turning points or what were some major like needle movers or maybe what you would consider to be game changers, big decisions that you guys made in the business that took you from one level to the next level to the next level?
So a few things. One, when we started our business, I knew that I didn't want to build it like anyone else. What everyone else in the industry was doing, I was trying to do the opposite. Everyone was going chasing the low end of the fruit, the Californias, the Hawaiis, New Jerseys, everything else. I'm like, let's go to the most cheap energy market, the place that solar doesn't make sense, and we started there. Everybody else was saying sales only, sales only. I'm like, let's go vertically integrated, right? So like those are like some foundational moves, like staying away from red line models, actually building real culture, doing things on purpose, from a foundational level were absolutely critical. I think foundation is the most important in any, like, yes, we had some pivot moments and I'll share those with you, but like those are ultimately what allowed us to go build scale the right ways. Is we had a clear vision of what we were building. We had a 5-year model that we were going after. We knew what we were going to say yes to and what we were going to say no to. And I would argue that it's more important the things you say no to than the things that you say yes to. And so like that was very, very critical. Early on, we didn't do anything to impress others, and which was a big mistake I made in my first business. And what I mean by that is like, I didn't care if people saw me as a successful business owner, right? Like, I think a lot of when guys first start businesses, they want to tell their friends and family and look good to society as the successful business owner. I gotten over that, right? Like my first business took care of that for me. Like I would rather invest in the things that actually mattered, right? Like I didn't need the nice car and everything else, but I needed the best marketing. I needed the best, like, to the customer, look incredible, but we're operating out of a garage. So we operated out of a garage for 2.5 years. I have a shop, 3,500 square feet, that we slowly built out over those 2.5 years. And we had 53 people in that garage the day that we moved out. And before we had left the garage, we had done over 75 million in revenue over those 2.5 years. And so, like, there was no ego in it. And it was all like doing things for the better of the business rather than for me to look good. Like, if people frowned on us operating out of a garage, I'm like, I don't care. Like, it's the best move. So there's a few pivotal moments, like things that, like, I would, you can call them blessings, you can call them took advantage of the right opportunity. But, like, one was when was it? October. I still remember the phone call. I call up a buddy that he's a partner. We had made him an equity partner in the business. His name was Matt. I call up Matt. I'm like, Matt, got this idea. We'd been in business 2 years at that point, and it was October 2019. I said, Matt, dude, what if we start selling this thing over the phone? And he was out riding his bike, and we started like fantasizing about this. Like, dude, we could sell it through Zoom. I know a lot of people don't know what Zoom is, because this was 2019. But I think we can train the customers on how to do it. So November, we recruit my brother Tony to come and run our inside sales team, and we start building it out. Fast forward 4 months later, all heck breaks loose, and COVID hits. And by the time COVID hit, we had a 25-man sales floor that was operating remote. And, like, call it a blessing from God, call it whatever. Like, it's like the timing couldn't have been more perfect to be able to sell remotely. And I mean, people were ready to go.
Especially up in Washington, because you guys were shut down, huh?
Oh yeah. I mean, crazy everywhere.
Yeah.
And so same type of time frame, December of 2019, that same guy, Matt, he was over, like, purchasing our inventory from China and everything like that. And he calls me and Daryl into the conference room in my garage, and he's like, dudes, we have like, I don't know, $3 million in cash in the bank at the time. And he's like, look, I really think we should take 2 million of this and buy as many panels as we can. And we're like, why? He's like, dude, I know it's just a hunch, but I've been reading some news over in China, and there's this sickness going on. This is December 2019. Nobody's talking about COVID. And Matt says, dude, there's this sickness, and there's a chance it might do something to the shipping industry. I don't know. I just have a hunch. And so we go and we drop 2/3 of our bank account into panels. Dude. And everything's on the water and being delivered by the time COVID hits. And anybody that tried shipping anything during that time knows what a nightmare the port situation was. Like, literally, there were ships stuck out at sea right outside the ports for like 60 days.
Yep.
And so, while the majority of the solar industry was lacking for inventory, we had completely full warehouses of containers of panels and inverters and everything else. And so, like, again, that was just like stroke of luck, stroke of a blessing, whatever else. So those were like two huge moments.
Well, it's here, and what I'm hearing is number one is, like, think different than what everybody else is doing. Don't follow the same model, and then follow your gut. Listen to those hunches, because they can pay off.
Yeah, no, for sure. I'm a big gut guy. I want to do as much by strategy as possible, but ultimately, if I feel good about it, that's where my decision is going to lie.
Okay, so
Um,
you're super busy building this business. You guys are cranking, you guys are rolling, you guys are dominating the market. Like, you guys are having a lot of success, the money's flowing, all that kind of stuff. Tell me about some of your personal core values that you hold to, or that you held to and hold to, that kind of keep you grounded so that you don't get out in front of your skates.
yeah, you bet. So I've been a big believer that like you can all you can never balance time, but you can always balance impact. And that the impact needs to be balanced across the four core areas of life, which is your physical, economic, your associations, and your spirituality. And so for me, like God and family have always been number one, and I've put those things in front of everything, right? And like, so never sacrificing in any of those morals. Like a lot of guys build a business and then try to build a family around that, and I've always built a family and then build a business around that. And so like that's definitely been super important. And like during the whole time of building SoulGen, I also kept my fitness in check. I really believe that like when we are disciplined and take care of the body, that discipline shows up in every other area of life, right? And so like when I put in the work and I feel good and I'm mentally right, like things are gonna show up. And so where a lot of I would say a lot of gurus, they get rich, they're fat, then they get in shape. I actually stayed in shape the whole time and made it a priority. And I think it's important to know like you don't have to make sacrifices in these different areas. Like yes, yes, you may not be able to give it as much time as you once hoped, but you can always move the needle forward. Like 15 minutes spent with your kids is way better than like 2 hours with them while you're on your phone. And
Sure.
so like just balancing that impact as much as possible and making sure that the needle's always moving forward.
Let me ask you this too. Kind of, you just mentioned kids. A lot of times we have to bring business home with us when we're, a business owner or whatever. Do you feel like you learn to solve problems different at work than the way that you solve problems at home?
It's a
Like when
good
you think
that's
about when you think about challenges that you have to face as a business owner, and then the challenges that you face as a dad, like how do you approach those kind of challenges differently, would you say?
there's definitely some similarities. Um, I have to be a lot more loving, that's for sure, at home. Little more sensitive to emotions and of my wife and my daughters and everything else. And I screw up a lot, right? Like I think one value that both operate on is like willingness to take ownership of the truth, right? Like whether you're winning or losing, admitting where you're wrong, right? Like, and being open, like, so like my family knows I'm not perfect, but I'm very open about not being perfect. I don't try to pretend to be perfect. And like the same thing in running my business. Like I think it's a similar core value that has to be. I'm a big believer in how you do anything is how you do everything. Yes, you got to approach it a little bit different, but most of the same core principles govern all interaction.
With your kids, what's a practical piece of advice that you hope to be able to pass on to them that they can apply?
Yeah, I think one thing that I've done right with my kids is like I've tried to give them a similar childhood that made me who I am. Um, Obviously, they have a nicer home. They have a lot more blessings, different things. But like I've tried to instill in them work ethic and rules and like discipline. And so like, one of the things I got my kids involved in is at the age of 6, they start selling products, and I teach them about inventory and loans and paying interest and what it takes to. And so like they've gotten a really good education around those things, and all of them are invested on by their own accord in the stock market and different things like that. But like I have tried, my life, I try to live on purpose. The reason I live in Washington State and on a 23-acre farm is specifically for my children. Like, I knew that for my kids to get a similar childhood of discipline, they needed to be able to work. And so I bought a small farm. I bought it near where I grew up. I teach them similar principles. We planted 2.5 acres of black walnuts that they have to go out and hand weed, and just different things. And so I would say those are the things that I've done right. For everything I've done wrong, I hope that my example makes up for. Because I think kids definitely they soak up everything. They see the things that I've done professionally, and it's really cool when I see it manifest. Like the other night, I was sitting with the missionaries from my church. They were over for dinner, and my kids were all like having conversations with them, and then they all left off to their youth group for the night. And the missionaries turned to me and they say, "Man, your kids are like some of the most personable kids. Like, they actually talk to us and have interactions and everything else." And, like no other families that we go and we talk to, all their kids are like mutes and are like referred to as social, and it's funny because I can't even look back and say like, oh, there's one specific thing that I taught my kids to get them that way. So I have to just believe that like they've seen the example of like being somebody that loves people, being somebody that wants to communicate, and that the way that I've tried to live in a professional atmosphere that's rubbed off, and so like that's the biggest thing I just say is like, I don't know, you don't have to be perfect, but as long as you're trying.
So I want to explore this kids thing a little bit more. You talked about your childhood and kind of your upbringing. What are some of your fondest memories, or maybe some of those lessons that you learned as a kid that you've brought up and you're trying to instill? You mentioned hard work, and you guys have intentionally been on this big plot of land so that they can learn how to work hard. How would you describe your childhood and why you think it was so valuable to you, to the point that you want to almost kind of replicate it so that your kids learn those same lessons?
Yeah. So first of all, I think it's like the biggest mistake that we make as parents is we try to coddle our children and give them everything that they want, and expect them to turn out the same way that we did. Right. Like,
Yeah.
that's hilarious to me. So that's why I've tried to be intentional as much as possible. So going back to my childhood, like a couple things that like just immediately stick out, right? Like the rule in my household was at the age of 12, you had to provide for everything but underwear and food on the table. And so if I wanted clothes, shoes, gas, go on a date, do anything of my own consumption, I had to provide that money. And so like that was something that like taught me to take ownership of what I produce and not just be a consumer. And like that was such an important life lesson. The other like very important life lessons would be, as a missionary in my church, I paid for my mission, and it was very like we started saving for our missions when I was 10 years old. And so I've been very intentional about like my kids, look, if you want to go to college, you want to go on a mission, you want to do anything, that's not dad's money, that's yours, right? Like you're going to do that. And also the way, and this may change someday, but my kids right now have the expectation that when dad dies, they get $0. And so I always tell them, I say, look, I'm not going to give you a dime, but I will give you all of my knowledge. So anything you want from a knowledge standpoint or a skill standpoint, I'm willing to teach you. All you have to do is ask. I said, but when I die, your hand's not going to be out. Like you expect nothing from me. And so like it just helps them approach life from a completely different, and again, not perfect. Like some of my kids are still entitled, right? And they need to be slapped every once in a while. But like it's a very similar way to the way I was raised, that like dad was not going to be there to save me, and like my dad didn't pay for my college. My dad didn't pay for my mission. My dad didn't, pay for these different things. How he invested in my company because I was a good salesman, but he didn't,
He learned a hard lesson himself, didn't he?
yeah. And so, and the interesting thing is like I've told, like my son right now, he has a nursery of trees. Me and him are partners on it. But the way that I set up all my partnerships with my kids, the same way I would a real partner, I don't give them any benefit of the doubt. And so like, look, you want me to help provide some money. I'm taking 51% of this stuff, and you're doing all the work, and you're doing everything else. And then once you cover my money back, then we're like, you paying my money back first, and then we split profits 51-49. And like, just stuff like that again was instilled in me as a child. And a couple other things that like I fondly look back at is like, my dad, although he didn't have a lot of money, he was an extremely disciplined investor. He made $60,000 to $65,000 a year as a school teacher, and he saved half of his paycheck.
Jeez.
Like, and so like that discipline like taught me so much. And I knew about it as a child too. Like we talked about money, which was so important. I say most poor families don't talk about money. They avoid the concept and whatnot. But then also the other thing that probably has been the most impactful is the level of sacrifice that my parents made, and their dedication to charitable efforts. And like every Christmas, we would find a family that was less fortunate than us, and we would figure out a way to take care of them through Secret Santa or some different way. Every month, my parents, not only did they pay 10% of their income in a tithe, but I would look over my shoulder and see my mom cutting $300 offering checks, which, dude, $300 for someone that makes 60 grand a year, and they're doing that monthly. Like, dude, that touched me as a young kid. And it wasn't like they were like, hey, look at us, this is what we're doing. It's like I found out on my own, and which I think leaves like a greater impact. And so like those are the same type of things that I've tried to instill into my children. And when it comes to like giving and being like identifying opportunities that we can be anonymously take care of other families and do things, and like getting their involvement in those type of things, I think has been like the greatest thing that I can do as a father.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. Chris, when you think about resiliency, where does resiliency come from? How does a person become resilient?
They fall on their face enough times and keep getting up.
Because everybody's going to fall, right? There's a difference between somebody that's super resilient and not. Well, maybe that's the better question, because eventually everybody has to get up. Everybody does move forward. Everybody gets through something, but we would still maybe define somebody as having resiliency or being resilient over somebody that's not quite as. What would you say would be the difference for somebody that's truly resilient?
I think someone that's truly resilient understands why they keep getting up. And so like, and being okay with the failure, and understanding that even though you have a goal or a direction that you're going, that the route may not always be the same, same way you pictured it. And so that, that was a lesson that I was able to learn early. And I had a failure in sports between my sophomore and my junior year that was like devastating to little Chris. And, I grew up on the field. My dad was the head football coach and the head wrestling coach. And so like everything we did was sports centered. And, I had and when I was in high school, my dad was no longer the coach, but I had a situation where like I had a goal and I didn't achieve that goal. And it was pretty utterly depressing. Um, and I can distinctly remember a decision that I made, like not to give up and that to find another way to be able to figure out that goal. And it had to do with me being the quarterback of our team. And I'd played quarterback my whole life. And the coaches, literally like 2 days before the first game of the season, my junior year, they said that, they were going to go with this other kid. And I was like heartbroken because I had done everything. I had done all that they required, all that they had asked. I had worked my butt off, and it was like it was like I felt like my whole life was like for naught. And there's a point of like depression that I went through, and like just poor performance and everything else. And like finally, like I made the decision. I'm like, all right, I'm not going to allow coaches to like determine whether or not I hit this. And I had this goal on my wall since I was 6 years old. I had 2 goals on my wall. One was state champion, and the other was to get married in the temple. And I still had that. I still have that little yellow piece of paper. It's in my safe now. From, like I said, I wrote it when I was 6, and I felt like that was being ripped from me. And so ultimately, I said, "Screw you," and gained a bunch of weight, hit the weight room, and I converted to a lineman. And and it's funny because to this day I still carry the moniker QB associated with my social profiles, and it's actually, a lot of people don't realize it. It's to remember. It's to remember this, like that was taken from me, and that I will always figure out another way to find success. And so I ended up being a 2-way starter my senior year. I played right guard and middle linebacker on defense, and we ended up winning our school's first ever state championship.
Hey, that's freaking awesome.
And so I would say there was probably a series of events that led up to that, but that was like my foundational event of resiliency that I've been able to draw upon. I don't draw upon it nearly as much anymore because I've had a lot of other crazy things that have happened to me since that I draw more upon. But yeah, that one will always be kind of but yeah, to answer your question, I'm not sure exactly what leads to it, but I think a decision and just understanding like that there's always another way to find success.
Well, and I love what you said too. It's like recognizing that you failed, but be okay with it, because once you can be okay with it and understand where you're at, you can reassess and say, okay, I'm going to focus on this goal. And like you said, find another way. And then it's a matter of like, how do I get out of this? And what's the speed that I'm going to keep moving forward? Am I going to sit here and wallow in it and say, woe is me? Or am I going to keep pushing forward? So if I'm looking at like the twin towers of awesome traits, I think that resiliency is one that I hope I have. I hope that I can instill in my own kids. The other one is consistency. If I'm ranking, traits that I want to see in people, consistency is so important. And I want to hear your thoughts, kind of why, if you agree with me, why consistency is important, and why is it so difficult for people to be consistent?
Yeah, and the other word that I love along with consistency that pairs right up with it is discipline, right?
Sure.
And
Sure.
and yeah, consistency to me is doing the things whether you feel like it or not, right? Like, and the hard part about life is 97% of the time we don't feel like it.
Yeah.
Like rarely do the emotions line up with what the actions need to be. Either you're feeling motivated and you physically aren't able, or you're unmotivated and you're physically able. And so, yeah, like, and I think the thing for me that's allowed me to stay consistent, if I'm not perfect at it at any event, but what's allowed me is disengage with the end result. Um, like as a society, we're in love with results. We're in love with the fruit. And the fruit is simply a derivative of elongated effort that you didn't feel like. And when we go and we make effort and we don't see immediate fruit, typically we become unmotivated, right? Like I ran 3 miles yesterday. Why am I not down 10 pounds? Right. And so with the second you can disengage with the end result, the disengage with the fruit and fall in love with doing the things that are tough and painful and hard, right? Like that's when life starts working for you. And when your third day, when you step on the scale and you've been disciplined and you step on only to find out that you've gained 2 pounds, you'll no longer care because that end result does not determine the input. And so you stick with it because you fall in love with the process. And so like I think that's been any secret to my success or anything else has just been disengaged, and which includes like when you have a big exit or you have a different thing like that, it's like you disengage with that. Like that doesn't define me. What defines me is the effort that I'm putting in every single day. And I even tried to get away from that for a little while. I tried retirement for 6 weeks and it was the worst 6 weeks of my life. and, and it's just because like I am disengaged with the results. I want the action, the discipline, the consistency. That's what true happiness is. And you know the reason I call my business Next Level is because wherever you're at, it's all about trends and where you're going. And if you're trending to the next level, if you have $1 billion in your bank account and you're trending down, you're going to be miserable. If you're a skinny person and you're trending down, you're going to be miserable, right? But if you have $1 in your bank account and you're trending up, you're going to be happy. If you have $1 million, like, it's all about trends, all about not the end result, but where you're going. And so like, for me, that's what I've figured out to fall in love with. And that is the requirement of consistency.
And I love that. I think I remember Kobe talking about that too. He said something like, "Love the process more than you love the result," something of that nature. And it's a lot of people can get really motivated and excited about the result, and that drives them for a little bit. But once it becomes too uncomfortable, or they have to get up early in the morning and be like, "Shoot, I got to keep doing this long run every single day in order to train for this race." Nah, I don't think I want to do this anymore. But I think that consistency is discipline over time, which really gives you the results that you want. And I love what you said there about like, don't worry about the result. The result's going to give itself. You're going to have a positive result one way or another. It might not be the result that you necessarily hope to get, but the fact that you engaged in the hard work and grit and process over time to get there, there will be a reward at the end of that rainbow that's going to be completely customized for you from your creator. That's going to be a benefit for your life in one way or another.
That's right. Love it.
So you mentioned Next Level Pros. This is your next venture. Tell me, what was the motivation to open up this new company, and what's your goal? What are you hoping to accomplish with it?
Yeah, you bet. Who are your listenership? Is this mainly your group, or is this outside of Fusion Power as well?
Well, we're hoping to get it outside of Fusion.
Sweet.
We've traditionally been in-house, doing more sales training and educating about solar, but we're trying to give more of a life kind of lessons, more kind of the things that we're talking about here. So I'd love
Love
to
it.
expand our
Love it.
listenership.
Yeah, so Next Level Pros, we're a coaching and training platform for businesses in which we help business owners change the world through running highly profitable businesses and focusing on changing the culture of their organizations to develop each of their people personally, top to bottom, physically, economically, with their relationships and their spirituality. And so, that's our focus. We have a 5-year roadmap in which we call Impact 125, which is to add 125 billion additional dollars of revenue to the economy within our community on an annual basis, and do it in a highly profitable way, because we know that profitable businesses can afford to take care of their employees, and those that take care of their employees serve their customers. And so that's what we're all about. Our mission is designing lives that impact the world. And again, going back to what I shared about balancing impact, life is about impact. And so I find passion and joy in helping people impact the world. And I'm a true believer that, if we want to change the world, the best and quickest way is through the entrepreneurial realm, is because we hold that golden ticket of paychecks, where if somebody comes in and they get paid, and then realize, man, I can get a whole lot more from this organization outside of just a paycheck, then we can really leave our fingerprint. And so that's my goal in life, is to change the world through entrepreneurship. And it's what drives me. It's what gets me out of bed in the morning. I'm excited. I'm building. I'm just as excited as any other business. And again, I'm inattentive to to what's in my bank account, and just more focused on doing it the right way.
Mission driven. I love it. As you've been working with all these different entrepreneurs and businesses that have joined your group, have you been able to identify any common pitfalls that most of them are putting themselves into, that you've been able to help them to see quickly? Or have you found any common mistakes that you've been able to correct with groups that you'd be able to share?
Yeah, one of the things I kind of hinted at is, a lot of businesses design their companies with the wrong priority list. They focus first on their customer, then their employee, and last their business. And it's the exact opposite is what makes success, right? Like you've got to be profit driven. And it sounds terrible and egotistical and everything else, but without profits, you can't do anything else. And so designing a business that's highly profitable, that in turn can provide an incredible culture and a platform that changed the lives of employees, the number one customer. And then in turn, they will take care of the end user. That is a foundational principle that most businesses get wrong. And there's a lot of different symptoms of that: the way that they price, the way that they pay, the way that they, just different things that go along with that. But I would say that's probably the number one. The other thing is, business owners do things for the wrong reasons all the time. And usually it's ego driven. And it's similar to my first business, right? They do things more to be seen rather than to impact. And so just removing yourself from trying to impress others and be more impressive to your organization is the most important.
Love it. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, just a couple of quick ones to finish up here as we get to the end of the hour. What's one of your favorite books that you've read lately? And did anything stand out in that book?
So lately, I would say there's a book called Indistractable. I'm not done with it yet, but the initial principles that are taught in there have been very like impactful to me. So Indistractable talks about how basically in today's society we're so easily distracted, and we use technology to take us away from boredom or productivity or whatever else, and like how you like can become this mental fortitude where like everything you do is on purpose, and you're in it and not because of it's a distraction. And because literally our uh, all modern day technology is meant and designed and creates notifications to distract you. And so but you have a choice if you can create the right mental fortitude. And so I really like that book.
I'm gonna put that down. Indistractable.
Yep.
Got to put that on my list.
The funny thing is I'm pretty sure it's written by the same author as Hooked. And Hooked is the opposite. It was the training platform that almost all modern day software companies have built off of the psychology of to hook in their customers. And so I think the same.
Well, we went too far. Let's reel this back a little bit.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Okay, next one. If Washington caught on fire like California and you only had 45 minutes to grab 2 to 3 items out of your house, assuming your family's all safe and you guys are all out, what would be the 2 to 3 items that Chris Lee would try to take with him?
So I would grab my missionary journals, and I would take I have a small collection of religious texts that are both valuable sentimentally and financially.
Nice. Okay, last question. What is something that will always make you laugh?
Man, I don't know if I've been asked that question in a long time. Dumb and Dumber.
Bingo. It is funny. It's even after 30 years, it's still hilarious. Good answers. Well, hey, buddy, I appreciate your time, dude. You gave your heart into everything that you do. I've loved going to your workshops. I've loved my association with you, and even in this conversation, just your input and your insight, your experience that you share. It's you impact everybody that you're around, Chris, and I'm really grateful for your friendship, your mentorship, your example, and just the good person that you are. And I hope that a lot of people watch this and that they can learn, that they can grow, and that they can hopefully glean some of the goodness that you're shining forth into the world. So I really appreciate you being with us today.
I appreciate it. Is it right if I share my phone number if people want to text me?
Yeah, you bet. Go ahead.
Cool. Yeah. If any of you guys ever have any like questions about business or anything like that, you want to text me, go ahead and text me. It's 509-374-7554.
All right. Hey, Chris, thanks for being with us, man.
Appreciate
and for
it.
everybody listening, thank you for being here on the Fusion Power Podcast. We'll see you next